In this two-part video series, I'm going to be showing you how you can create a content modal using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So in case you're not familiar with a modal, the way it works is you click an element on a page and then a foreground layer appears with some content. Now you can have a modal with any kind of HTML content. In this example, I'm keeping it quite simple, having an image and a description. I'm also going to be showing you how you can add user controls to the modal. So if a user wants to go backwards or forwards through the images or whatever content you're using, they can do that with some controls down below. Now this is going to be a two-part series because some of you may not want to add user controls. So in this first video, I'm going to be showing you how you can create a basic modal. That is, you click on an image and it opens with just the content, and you click somewhere on the modal again and it closes. In the next video, I'm going to be showing you how you can add user controls using JavaScript. So the next video is going to be a bit more JavaScript heavy. So if you'd like to make sure that you don't miss out on part 2 of this project, and you'd also like to see other updates from us, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. So now let's get started with part 1 of this modal tutorial. So for this tutorial, I'm assuming that you already have some elements in your HTML, or you've appended some elements to the DOM that you want to click on to open the modal. So here I have 6 image elements in my index.html document. I'm sticking with these because it's nice and simple, just one element. But in your modal, you may want to click on an entire container that has more elements inside it. I'm just going to keep things simple here with images. The important point is whatever type of element you want a user to click on to open the modal, it needs to be a direct child of a container element. So here I have this main div with an ID of container. You see that the images are all direct children. So you need to make sure that's also the case in your HTML. So you'll see in the head of this document that I'm already linking to a style sheet, styles.css, and inside there I just have an import statement at the top that's importing the Open Sans font from Google Fonts, and then I'm applying that font to the body. So just one stylistic application so far, and script.js, which I'm linking to at the bottom of index.html, is completely empty. So let's go about creating the modal now. Now a modal is just a foreground layer that is not visible until a user clicks on one of the elements that opens it, in this case one of the images. So first of all, what I need to do is create it in the HTML, and then I'm going to make it non-visible using CSS. So I'm going to start by creating a div, and I'll give that an ID of modal, and inside this div I'm going to create an image element. And for the src, I'm going to change that now to images meadow.jpg, and I'll leave the alt. In a real project, of course, you'd want the alt attribute, but in this, for this demo, not necessary. Now the src is images/meadow.jpg for now. What we're going to do is when the user clicks on one of the images, we're going to dynamically change the src using JavaScript. And so the user is not going to see what the src is initially. So we could change it to bike or fireworks, it doesn't matter. I'm just entering something, so there is an src to begin with. So I'm going to give this image an ID of modal image so I can select it in JavaScript. Now what I'm going to do is head over to CSS and style the modal. So I'll start by selecting the modal. Now this is the container for the image, so I want this to have a background color, and I'm going to make this an RGB of, going to make this black, so that's 0, 0, 0, and then I'm going to give it an alpha value of 0.8, so you can still see the background even when the modal is open. I want the modal to stretch the entire width of the viewport, so I'm going to set the width to 100% viewport width, the height to 100% viewport height, and then I don't want there to be any space between the modal and the left hand side of the screen and the top, so I'm going to say left 0, top 0, and I want the modal to be fixed there, so set that to fixed. Now there's content inside of this element, the image, so I want the image to be centered when the modal opens, so I can do that by setting the display to flex, and then the way that you can center the content is by setting justify content to center and also align items to center. Now, as I mentioned, the modal is a foreground layer, so I'm going to set the Z index to 10 to bring it to the foreground. Now, the modal should be visible at the moment, so if I open my HTML document here, you can see that the modal is open and we can't click on any of the images in the background. So I want to change that so the modal is not visible at first, and I can do that here in the style sheet. I'm going to create a new class called noDisplay, and I'm going to set the display to none. So I'll save that now and head over to index.html. Here I'm going to add the noDisplay class to the modal. So let's see what that looks like in the browser. So I'm refreshing now, and you may be surprised to see that nothing is happening. Now I want to show you this because it's very easy to get caught out. It's because styling by ID is stronger than styling by class. So this display flex is overriding the display none here. So what I need to do is downgrade this styling to a class styling. So to resolve this, I'm going to change the styling from ID to class, and then in index.html, I'm going to add modal to the class list. Now, if I save that and refresh in the browser, you'll see that the modal is no longer open. So we've almost got a functional modal. All that remains left to do is to add some JavaScript so that when I click one of these images, the modal opens and the source of the image in the modal is set to the one I click. So heading to script.js, what I want to do first of all is select the container. So I'm going to say const container equals document.getElementById, and the name is container. Next, I want to select the modal image because I'm going to want to change the source on that every time a user clicks on one of the images to match the image clicked. So the ID on that was modal image. Now the first thing I want to do, now I've selected some of the elements, is I want to get all of the image elements in the container, and when one is clicked, I want two things to happen. I want the source of the modal image to change to match the image, and I also want to open the modal. So to select all of the images, what I can do is apply query selector all to the container, and I want to select all the image elements within the container, and I'm going to save the result of that in a new variable called images. So I'm just going to log those to the console just to make sure that worked. So let's see. So in the console you can see I've got a node list of 6, and each one of those is an image. Now what I want to do is add an event listener to each one. So for that I'm going to be using a loop. So for this I'm going to use a for loop that runs as many times as the length of images. So for that I create a for loop. I want the initial value of the looping variable to be 0. I want the loop to break when I is no longer less than images.length, and I want I to increase by 1 each time the loop is run. And in each loop I want an event listener to be added to image I. So I say images I add event listener, and I'm listening out for a click, and then I say what I want to happen in the callback function when that image is clicked. So the first thing I want to do is the source of modal image to change. So I want modal image, and I can access its source like this, modal image.src equals, and then I want it to be equal to images i.src. So it's going to be the same source as the image clicked. And I'd also like the modal to become visible when one of the images is clicked. So to do that, I need to edit the class list of modal. So I need to select that in JavaScript first of all. So that has an ID of modal. So document.getElementById, modal. And then in the loop, I want to say modal.class list. So I'm editing the class list and I want to remove something from the class list, and I want to remove the noDisplay class. Okay, so let's see if that works. I'm going to save now and head over to the browser, refresh, and if I click on one of the images, it should open the modal and set the source of the image in the modal to that image. So great, fireworks, fireworks, umbrella, umbrella. So it seems to be working as we expected. The issue now is that once the modal is open, I can't close it again. So to fix that, I'm going to add an event listener to the modal that's going to close it when it's clicked. So that means if a user clicks anywhere on the modal, including the image or outside the image, it's going to close the modal. So let's add that now. So I can do this outside the loop. I'm just going to say modal.addEventListener, and I'm listening out for a click on the modal. And if there is a click on the modal, then this function is going to run. And what this function is going to do is it's going to edit the class list again, but it's going to add noDisplay. So it's no longer visible. So if I refresh now, open one of the images, click somewhere on the page, you can see that it's closing again. Now, in case you'd like some text to appear underneath an image when it's opened in the modal, I'll show you how to do that now. So head over to index.html, and you'll see that for each image, I have a description attribute that stores a placeholder text for now. So I'm going to create a div here, and I'm going to give this an ID of image description. And I want to append the image description inside of this div. So what I need to do is open script.js and select the new element that I created. So now what I want to do when I add the event listener is not just change the source of the modal image, but also set the text content of this new element to the attribute of the image clicks. So to do that, I want to set the text content of description, and I want the text content to be images I, and I want it to be the attribute, and the attribute name is description. So this will return the text inside there. So let's see if that worked by heading over to the browser. I refresh. Now I click on one of the images, and you can see just faintly that there is some text there. Unfortunately, it's not very visible at the moment, but you can see that for each image, the text is there. But we can easily fix that with a little bit of CSS. So what I'm going to do is head back to index.html. Now there's already a flexbox applied to this modal container. So what I'm going to do is create a new container inside of it. And I'm going to put the content that at the moment is there, the image and the text, put that in this new container. So this new container is going to be centered by the flexbox on the modal. And then this container, which I'm going to give an ID of modal container. So I'm also going to use flexbox on this modal container, and I want to arrange the image and the description vertically. So I can do that by heading over to styles.css. I want to select modal container. So I want to display flex, and then I want to say flex direction should be column. And I also am going to set the color of the text inside it to white, so that's now visible. So that should already be working. If I refresh, click on it, you can now see there's image description. I could touch that up a bit more by saying text align center. I also want to add a little bit of space between the image and the text because they were very close together. So I'm going to select the image description, and I want to give that a little bit of a margin on the top, so there's just a little bit of space there. So I'll set that to 1 rem, which is a responsive unit. So open the modal, and you can see that the text appears below the image. It's now visible, centered, and there's also a little bit of a gap between the text and the image. And when I click, you'll see that the modal closes. In part 2, I'm going to be showing you how you can add user controls to the modal so that a user can navigate through the images while the modal is still open, and there'll be a thumbnail preview for the next image and the previous image. So I'll be publishing the follow-up video very soon. If you'd like to make sure that you catch that and other updates from us, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.